My father thought he was breaking me that Thanksgiving. He announced he was selling the family business, leaving me with nothing. And then I just laughed because he had no idea, absolutely no idea, who he was actually talking to. My name is Morgan Adams, and for 32 years, I was the forgotten middle child of the Adams software dynasty. This was the Thanksgiving I finally showed them everything. As I arrived at our sprawling Boston mansion, I saw my dad, phone in hand, whispering with unusual excitement to my mom. They were practically buzzing. They had no idea that beneath my simple black dress beat the heart of someone they'd so drastically underestimated. The bombshell Dad was about to drop at dinner would change our family forever. Yes, but definitely not in the way he expected. Our life looked perfect from the outside. A childhood spent in Brooklyn, one of Boston's wealthiest suburbs, with a 6-bedroom colonial, an indoor pool, and a lawn that literally needed 3 gardeners. We were the picture-perfect American success story. My grandfather, Robert Adams, started Adams Software Solutions back in 1978, in his garage, with just a second-hand computer and a brilliant idea. He built it into a regional powerhouse. Then, in 1995, my father, Harold Adams, took over. Dad was aggressive. Under his leadership, Adams Software exploded from a $10 million family business to a $50 million enterprise, boasting over 200 employees and clients nationwide. And trust me, every holiday dinner, every family vacation, every single barbecue, they all inevitably turned into a sermon about his business genius. The Adams name became synonymous with success in Boston, and Dad never let anyone forget it. Especially us, his kids. There were 3 Adams kids. Garrett, my older brother, 38, was the golden child. He had zero aptitude for business, majored in communications, and partied his way through college. Yet, the day after graduation, Dad handed him a vice president position on a silver platter. Garrett spent more time on his yacht or with his endless parade of girlfriends than he did actually working. Still, Dad was absolutely convinced Garrett was the natural heir to the Adams throne. Then there was me, Morgan, forever stuck in the middle at 32. I was different. I inherited my grandfather's genuine passion for technology. I taught myself to code at 12, built my first app at 15. I went to MIT, studied computer science and business, graduated summa cum laude, and had genuinely innovative ideas for modernizing the company. But somehow, during business discussions, Dad always looked right through me, like I was invisible. My youngest sister, Megan, 29, completed our trio. She brilliantly leveraged our family name to become a lifestyle influencer, racking up hundreds of thousands of followers who adored her perfectly curated glimpses into old-money New England living. She had absolutely zero interest in software or business operations, yet never missed a chance to post about being a proud Adams software heiress while contributing precisely nothing to its success. Mom, Diane, came from old Boston money. She handled family conflict the way all proper Beacon Hill wives did, by completely ignoring it and pouring another glass of Chardonnay. She saw herself as the peacekeeper, but in reality, she enabled Dad's worst behaviors, especially his blatant dismissal of my business acumen. Harold, maybe you should listen to Morgan's idea, she'd occasionally suggest at dinner, only to immediately shrink back when Dad shot her that look. Diane, please. This is actual business we're discussing, he'd snip, before turning back to Garrett to continue their fascinating conversation about golf or yacht clubs or whatever non-business topic they were actually discussing. Our family gatherings always revolved around business talk, yet somehow, I was always excluded. Dad and Garrett would dominate with their industry jargon and inside jokes. I'd sit there silently, even though I understood the technology and the market better than both of them combined. If I dared to contribute, Dad would just smile condescendingly and say, "That's sweet, Morgan." But leave the business discussions to the people who understand the real world. The real breaking point came when I was 22. I was fresh out of MIT, graduated with honors, and I'd developed a cloud-based integration solution. It could have revolutionized our product line years before any competitors even thought of it. I poured months into preparing a comprehensive business plan, market analysis, and technical specifications. Dad finally agreed to let me pitch it during a board meeting, supposedly as a professional courtesy. I can still feel the mix of nerves and excitement, my heart pounding as I walked into that mahogany-paneled boardroom, laptop and materials in hand. The board members, all men in their 50s and 60s, Dad's old friends, watched with polite but utterly distant expressions. 10 minutes into my presentation, Dad checked his watch. He sighed loudly. Then he raised his hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "I think we've seen enough," he said, that tight smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Morgan, sweetheart, this is all very creative, but completely impractical for a serious enterprise like ours. Our clients want stability, not experimental technologies." He turned to the board, giving an apologetic shrug. "My daughter just graduated college, full of these academic ideas." Then, a dismissive wave. "Now, shall we move on to actual business matters?" The humiliation burned through me. It was scorching. I packed up my materials, feeling their polite chuckles and whispers, watching them move on as if I'd never even been there. That night, a silent fury settled in my chest, and I made a decision that would change absolutely everything. I would leave Boston, leave the family business, and build something entirely of my own. Something so undeniably successful that even my father couldn't dismiss it. I packed my bags and moved to San Francisco with just $5,000 in savings and a fire in my belly. My parents, of course, assumed it was just a phase, a childish tantrum. They indulged me with patronizing amusement. "She'll be back when she runs out of money," I overheard Dad tell Mom on the phone during one of our increasingly rare calls. Those early years, they were brutal. My tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood ate up almost my entire monthly budget. I lived on ramen noodles and cheap coffee, working 80-hour weeks, first at entry-level coding jobs, then as a freelance developer. Every single dollar I saved went straight into building my company. I founded Everest Holdings under a pseudonym, Emmy Stone. The initials stood for Morgan Elizabeth, but that was my secret. I wanted my success, or even my failure, to be completely disconnected from the Adams name. I started small, developing custom enterprise solutions for hungry startups, reinvesting every single profit. By year 3, I had 10 employees and a real office in Soma. The breakthrough moment arrived when I developed a proprietary integration platform, a solution allowing legacy systems to communicate seamlessly with modern cloud services. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was remarkably similar to what I'd pitched to my father all those years ago. Soon, venture capital came calling, but I was fiercely determined to control my destiny, so I maintained majority ownership. Over the next 7 years, I strategically acquired smaller tech companies that complemented our services. Everest Holdings grew. It exploded to a $200 million valuation, with offices in 3 major cities. Through it all, I meticulously maintained my pseudonym in every single business dealing. In the tech world, Emmy Stone was known as a brilliant, reclusive founder who rarely gave interviews or appeared at industry events. When I absolutely had to make public appearances, I used subtle changes to my appearance and let my COO do most of the talking. My family, they remained utterly oblivious to my success. During holiday calls and occasional visits, I kept my answers vague, describing my work as doing okay or still figuring things out. Dad never pressed for details. He'd already dismissed my career as inconsequential anyway. And that, frankly, suited me perfectly. It gave me the space I needed to build Everest into something that would one day shock them all. By the way, if you're still with me, if any of this resonates with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the climax of this story. And there are more unbelievable tales coming your way. What they had no clue about was that for the past year, I had been meticulously acquiring shares in companies that were key suppliers and even clients of Adams Software. I devoured their quarterly reports, pinpointed every weakness, and strategically positioned Everest Holdings as the perfect buyer to propel Adams Software into the next generation. 6 months prior, I'd had my CFO send an anonymous acquisition offer through a third party. My father, predictably, rejected it without even a second glance. Now, A decade after that humiliating boardroom moment, I was finally returning home for Thanksgiving. And I had a plan that would change everything. Adam's software was bleeding. Their technology was ancient. They were hemorrhaging market share. My father didn't know it yet, but I was about to become both his worst nightmare and his only salvation. The week before Thanksgiving, I sat in my sleek corner office, overlooking the San Francisco Bay, finalizing the paperwork for what would be the most important deal of my entire life. My assistant knocked, entering with my travel itinerary. "Your private jet is confirmed for Tuesday at 11 a.m., she said, placing the folder on my desk. "Are you sure you don't want your executive team in Boston for the signing?" I shook my head. "No, this is personal. I need to handle it alone." After she left, my phone rang. It was Isabella, my best friend, my confidant from those brutal, struggling early days when we'd shared a thin wall between our tiny studio apartments. "Are you really going through with this family Thanksgiving charade?" she asked, without preamble. After everything they did, after 2 years of barely speaking to them. I sighed, spinning in my chair to face the window. "I have to be there, Isabella. In person, when it happens. I need to see his face." "I remember the last Christmas disaster," she said carefully. "Your father announced Garrett's promotion to executive vice president while you sat there, with your unacknowledged Series B funding round. You came back to California and didn't speak to them for months." The memory stung. It absolutely stung. Dad had raised a toast to the future of Adam's software, looking directly at my brother, who, by the way, had been too hungover to contribute anything meaningful to the strategy meeting that morning. "This time will be different," I promised her. "Everything changes this Thanksgiving." That evening, I meticulously packed, deliberately choosing a wardrobe designed to make a statement. Gone were the casual clothes my family always associated with Paul Morgan. Instead, I selected power suits, a stunning Chanel dress for Thanksgiving dinner, Louis Vuitton heels. Subtle signifiers of success that only the truly wealthy would recognize. A Patek Philippe watch, a Bottega Veneta handbag, understated diamond earrings from Tiffany. Nothing ostentatious, but everything undeniably, unmistakably expensive. After years of deliberately downplaying my success around my family, I wanted them to see glimpses of it, just a taste, before the final, earth-shattering revelation. Tuesday morning, I boarded the private jet, a luxury I rarely used, preferring commercial flights despite my wealth. But this trip warranted the exception. During the 5-hour flight, I reviewed the contract one last time, ensuring every single detail was absolutely perfect. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd flown coach to Boston, eating airplane peanuts and squeezing into middle seats, all while building the very empire that now allowed me to arrive in such undeniable style. The jet landed at a private airfield just outside Boston. A sleek black Bentley was waiting on the tarmac, another unusual indulgence, arranged specifically for this trip. As we drove through those familiar neighborhoods toward Brooklyn, a strange mix of nostalgia and rock-solid determination hardened inside me. The Adams family estate looked exactly as it always had, imposing colonial architecture, perfectly manicured grounds now dusted with the first November snow, a wreath already hanging on the door. I told the driver to wait. Then, I took a deep, fortifying breath before walking up the steps I had climbed thousands of times before. Mom answered the door herself, bypassing the housekeeper in her eagerness. Her eyes widened, just slightly, as she took in my appearance. "Morgan, darling," she cooed, embracing me. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with the faint, telltale note of midday wine on her breath. "You look different. Is that a Rolex?" "Patek Philippe, actually," I corrected, returning her hug. "Good to see you, Mom." She ushered me inside, chattering endlessly about Thanksgiving preparations and Megan's latest Instagram milestone. I nodded politely, setting down my bag in the grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and glittering crystal chandelier. Home sweet home, with all its complicated, messy memories. "Your father's in his study," Mom said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "He's been very busy with some big deal." Very hush-hush, even with me. I smiled. I'll say hello before I settle in. Dad's study had always been forbidden territory for me, a masculine sanctuary of leather, mahogany, and impenetrable business journals. I knocked once, then entered without waiting for a response. A small, but deliberate, act of defiance. He looked up from his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose. Surprise flickered across his face, then settled into his usual, mild disinterest. "Morgan, you made it." He stood for a brief, awkward hug, then gestured vaguely toward the visitor's chair. "The trip from California was good. Very smooth," I said deliberately, not taking the offered seat. "I flew private. Saves time." A momentary confusion crossed his features. "Private? That must have been expensive." I just shrugged. "Business is good." Before he could inquire further, his phone rang. With a perfunctory, "Excuse me, this is important," he turned away to answer it. I used that precious moment. I glanced at the papers on his desk, and there it was. The Everest Holdings acquisition proposal, my company's logo prominently displayed. My heart raced, but I locked down my composure as he finished his call. "Sorry about that," he said hastily, gathering the papers into a folder. "Big things happening at the company. You wouldn't understand." That familiar dismissal rolled off me like water now. "Of course, Dad. I'll let you get back to it." I left his study and headed upstairs to my old bedroom. Mom had preserved it as a shrine to my teenage self. Dusty debate trophies, computer science awards, MIT pennants still adorned the walls, poignant testaments to achievements that had never, not once, impressed the one person whose approval I had sought most desperately. After freshening up, I headed downstairs. I found Garrett in the living room, already nursing a scotch at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He had Dad's tall frame, his confident posture, but years of privileged indulgence had definitely softened him around the middle. Well, the prodigal sister returns," he slurred, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Still playing with computers in California." "Something like that," I replied with a tight smile. "How's your little startup doing? Making any money yet?" His condescension was so familiar, it almost felt like home. Before I could even properly answer, Megan burst into the room, phone held at the perfect angle to capture her grand entrance for her Instagram followers. "Morgan is here, everyone. Family reunion time," she announced to her phone, before kissing my cheeks. "You look expensive, sis. Did you finally find yourself a rich boyfriend?" "No, just working hard," I said, pointedly stepping out of her camera frame. Garrett brought his new girlfriend. Megan stage whispered, still recording. "Amber. She's 24 and does yoga professionally." On cue, a willowy blonde entered, wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that accentuated her perfect figure. Garrett immediately pulled her to his side with proprietary pride. "Amber, this is my sister Morgan. She lives in San Francisco and does tech stuff." His vague wave dismissed a solid decade of my professional accomplishments. "Oh my God, I love San Francisco." Amber gushed. "The shopping is amazing." Our awkward small talk was abruptly interrupted by the sound of Dad's raised voice from his study. The words were muffled, but his excited tone vibrated through the entire house. "Yes, absolutely. Tomorrow, after Thanksgiving. $50 million is the final offer. Everest Holdings has been very insistent on the terms." I excused myself to the kitchen, desperate for a moment alone. The household staff, bless them, had always been kinder to me than my own family. Maria, our housekeeper of 20 years, was calmly preparing vegetables for tomorrow's feast. "Miss Morgan," she smiled warmly. "It is good to see you. You look well. California agrees with you." "Thanks, Maria. Need any help?" I asked. She shook her head gently. "Your mother wants everything perfect for tomorrow. Big day, she says. Your father has news." I nodded, a strange thought entering my mind. Did the entire household staff know about the sale before his own children did? So I gathered. The pre-dinner drinks hour was agonizing. Mom fluttered about with forced cheerfulness. Dad checked his phone every 3 minutes, practically vibrating with excitement. Garrett bragged about his new boat to anyone who would listen, and Megan, of course, documented everything for her followers. I sipped my wine slowly, observing the family dynamics with fresh, cold eyes. I was no longer the hurt daughter desperately seeking validation, but a successful businesswoman poised to change the game entirely. "Dinner is ready," Mom finally announced, ushering us toward the formal dining room, the very room where the family had gathered for holiday meals for 3 generations. I took a deep breath, and I followed them, knowing with absolute certainty that by the time dessert was served, nothing would ever be the same. The Addams family Thanksgiving dinner was always a ridiculously formal affair. The massive mahogany dining table gleamed under the crystal chandelier, set with Wedgwood china that only saw the light of day on special occasions. Sterling silver candelabras held ivory-tapered candles, casting a warm glow over a magnificent autumnal centerpiece Mom had undoubtedly commissioned from Boston's most expensive florist. I noted with mild, internal amusement that I'd been seated at the absolute far end of the table, as far from Dad's head-of-the-table spot as humanly possible. Typical. Garrett sat at Dad's right hand, Amber by his side, while Megan claimed the spot to Dad's left. Mom took her traditional place at the opposite end, with me beside her, symbolically separated from the inner circle of family business by the entire length of polished wood between us. Maria and the kitchen staff brought out course after course, butternut squash soup, harvest salad, and finally, the star of the show, a 25-pound turkey, roasted to golden perfection, accompanied by all the traditional sides. Dad carved with ceremonial precision, while Megan, of course, filmed for her social media, providing breathless commentary. And he's Daddy carving the turkey, just like his father before him, continuing the Addams family tradition of excellence in everything they do. I caught Mom wincing slightly at Megan's performance, then taking a large, hurried sip of her wine. By my count, it was her 4th glass since I'd arrived. Once our plates were piled high, Dad raised his glass for the traditional Addams family gratitude ritual. It was another performance, where we each shared what we were thankful for. It had once been meaningful, truly, before it devolved into a competitive status report. Garrett went first, as the eldest always did. "I'm thankful for another record-breaking quarter at Addams Software," he began, completely straight-faced, though I knew from my research that the company had actually lost market share for the 3rd consecutive quarter. "And for my new 42-foot yacht, the Addams Legacy," he said, squeezing Amber's hand, "and for new beginnings with this amazing woman." Amber giggled, kissing his cheek, while Megan made exaggerated gagging motions when Garrett wasn't looking. Megan went next, phone still clutched in hand. "I'm so thankful to have reached 1 million followers this year. My collaboration with Luxury Life Cosmetics has been amazing, and I'm grateful to be in Addams and represent our family brand to the world." She beamed at Dad, who nodded approvingly, even though he'd often complained privately about her frivolous career. When my turn came, I carefully set down my fork and spoke clearly. "I'm thankful for the lessons life has taught me. That sometimes rejection leads to the right path. That persistence matters more than privilege. And that success is the best teacher." I raised my glass. "To finding your own way." Dad frowned slightly, perhaps detecting something in my tone. But he quickly moved on to his own gratitude speech, which predictably centered on the business legacy he had built. Mom offered generic thanks for family and health, her words slightly slurred, her smile increasingly strained. Throughout the meal, Dad seemed utterly distracted, checking his phone under the table, occasionally whispering to Mom. Garrett dominated the conversation with boastful stories about clients he'd supposedly impressed, while Megan interrupted constantly to share comments from her followers watching her Thanksgiving Instagram story. As Maria brought in the pumpkin and pecan pies, Dad suddenly tapped his knife against his crystal water glass. The sharp ping cut through the dinner conversation, a sudden, startling silence falling over the table. "I have an announcement to make," he said, standing at the head of the table with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "One that affects everyone, hey?" The table fell utterly silent. Even Megan slowly lowered her phone. "As you know," he began, "I've dedicated my life to building Addams Software into a leader in our industry. But all good things evolve, and the time has come for change. He paused dramatically. I have decided to sell the company. Garrett choked on his wine, sputtering. What? Dad, you can't be serious. Dad raised his hand for silence. I've been in negotiations for months with a very interested buyer. The deal will be finalized tomorrow. Megan gasped theatrically. But Daddy, what about the Adams legacy? My brand is built around being an Adams software heiress. That brings me to the second part of my announcement. Dad continued, his expression unreadable. The proceeds from the sale will not be going to you children as inheritance. That's when both Garrett and Megan erupted in outrage. That's our birthright. Garrett slammed his fist on the table, rattling the Wedgwood china. What do you mean? Megan wailed, now live-streaming the entire family drama to her followers. Where's the money going? Dad waited for their furious outburst to subside. Your mother and I will be using part of it for our retirement. The rest will go to establishing the Adams Foundation, a charitable organization to support technology education. This is robbery. Garrett stood, his face flushed with incandescent anger. I've given 10 years to this company. You promised it would be mine someday. You promised all of us. Megan joined in, tears streaming down her face, though she still kept her phone carefully angled to capture her most flattering crying angle. Throughout the chaos, I remained perfectly still, taking small, deliberate bites of my pecan pie. Mom, surprisingly, noticed my calm. She gave me a quizzical look. Morgan, she said quietly, you don't seem surprised. The table gradually quieted. Everyone, one by one, turned toward me, suddenly remembering my presence. Actually, I said, setting down my dessert fork with almost surgical precision, I just have one question. I looked directly at my father. Who is the buyer? Dad's chest puffed with pride. He was clearly pleased to have this important information that we didn't. A very successful tech investment firm called Everest Holdings. They are paying $50 million, which is more than generous, given our recent market challenges. I took a slow sip of water, using the moment to steady myself for what came next. The room felt charged with an almost crackling electricity. The moment hung suspended, caught between the past and the inevitable future. Dad, I said finally, my voice calm, clear, and utterly unwavering. I am Everest Holdings. The room went completely, utterly silent. You could literally hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, marking the seconds of frozen disbelief. For several agonizing heartbeats, nobody moved. The silence was absolute, suffocating, as if the very air around us had solidified. I watched the emotions flash across my father's face in rapid, dizzying succession. Confusion, disbelief, pure shock, and then the first undeniable flickers of rage. Garrett was the first to physically react, knocking over his wine glass as he stood abruptly. The red liquid spread across the pristine white tablecloth like blood, a vivid, violent punctuation to the moment. What the hell are you talking about? He demanded, his eyes darting wildly between Dad and me, growing panic etching his features. Megan, incredibly, was still live-streaming, her hands shaking, but determined to capture what was rapidly becoming the most dramatic content her followers had ever seen. Oh my God, she whispered to her phone. Did my sister just say she owns Everest Holdings, the company buying our family business? Mom, bless her heart, reached for her wine glass, found it empty, and promptly grabbed the bottle instead. I stood slowly, a strange, profound calm settling over me after carrying this secret for so long. Emmy Stone, I said. Morgan Elizabeth Stone. That's the name I've been using professionally for the past decade, while building Everest Holdings into a $200 million company. Dad finally found his voice, sputtering. This is preposterous. Everest Holdings is run by Emmy Stone, a respected technology investor, not by my daughter, who's been playing at startups in California. I reached into my purse and removed my business card case, sleek, brushed platinum, the Everest Holdings logo subtly engraved on its surface. I slid a card across the gleaming table toward him. Actually, Dad, I'm Emmy Stone. I founded Everest Holdings 10 years ago, after you dismissed my business proposal and humiliated me in front of your entire board. Dad snatched up the card, staring at it as if it might spontaneously combust in his hands. This is some kind of joke, he said, but the certainty had completely drained from his voice. Everest Holdings now owns controlling interests in Nexus Technologies, Data Stream Solutions, and Tech Core Industries, I continued, naming Adams Software's 3 largest suppliers. We also recently acquired majority stakes in your 2 biggest clients, McKinsey Manufacturing and Westfield Distribution. The Adams Software acquisition is the final piece in a strategic plan I've been meticulously implementing for the past 18 months. You've been spying on our business, Garrett accused, his face contorted with pure rage. That's corporate espionage. No, Garrett, I countered, my voice firm. It's called market research. Everything I learned about Adams Software came from publicly available financial reports, industry analysis, and completely legal channels. I turned back to Dad. The truth is, Adams Software has been failing for years. Your technology is outdated, your management practices are from the last century, and you've lost 22% market share in the past 3 years. How dare you? Dad began, but I cut him off sharply. I tried to help you first, you know. 6 months ago, Everest Holdings sent an anonymous partnership proposal. It would have allowed the Adams name to remain on the company, while providing the capital and technology upgrades you desperately needed. You rejected it without even reading past the first page. Dad's eyes widened in recognition. The Phoenix proposal. That was you. I nodded. I wanted to give you a chance to accept help, without knowing it came from me. Your pride wouldn't allow it. So this whole time you've been plotting against your own family. Garrett shouted, practically foaming at the mouth. Planning to steal our company. Not steal, Garrett. Purchase. Legally. For $50 million, which, honestly, is more than its current market value. I kept my voice level, despite the emotional storm raging inside me. And let's be absolutely clear. This company stopped being our family business the day Dad made it evident that only one child would ever have a meaningful role in it, despite that child's complete lack of qualifications or interest in technology. Megan finally lowered her phone, the dizzying reality of the situation apparently sinking in. So, you're going to be our boss now? She asked, her voice small, almost childlike. Technically, yes, I confirmed. Though the current management structure will be completely reorganized. Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly, violently against the hardwood floor. This deal is off, he declared, his voice booming. I will not sell my company to my own daughter as some kind of revenge plot. I shook my head slowly, calmly. The contracts are signed, Dad. The board has approved the sale. The press release goes out tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Legally, Everest Holdings already owns Adams Software. I'll fight this, he threatened, though the desperate uncertainty in his eyes told me he had completely outmaneuvered him. My lawyers will, your lawyers, I interrupted gently, have already vetted the deal extensively. They advised you it was the best offer you'd get in the current market. What exactly will you tell them now? That you're upset because the brilliant CEO you've been negotiating with turns out to be your daughter. Mom spoke for the first time since my revelation, her words slightly slurred, but her gaze, surprisingly, was crystal clear. All these years, Morgan, all these years you were building this, while you thought I was failing, I finished for her, the old pain resurfacing. Yes, exactly. Dad slammed his hand down on the table. You have a choice to make right now, Morgan. You can be my daughter, or you can be the person who took my company. You cannot be both. The ultimatum hung in the air between us, so predictable it almost made me sad. 10 years ago, it would have utterly devastated me. Now, it merely confirmed what I had always known. That is where you are wrong. Dad, I said quietly, firmly. I am both. I always have been. You just refuse to see it. Megan had started crying in earnest now, mascara tracking down her perfectly contoured cheeks. What happens to us? To our trust funds? Our positions? That depends, I answered honestly, on whether you want to actually work for the company or just claim its benefits. Garrett pointed an accusing finger at me, his voice a venomous hiss. You planned this for Thanksgiving deliberately, didn't you? To humiliate us in front of the whole family. I planned it for Thanksgiving, I corrected him, my voice flat, because I knew everyone would be here. And because 10 years ago, at Thanksgiving dinner, Dad announced that he was promoting you to vice president, despite your complete lack of qualifications, while telling me that my degree from MIT and 3 years of coding experience wasn't enough to warrant even an entry-level management position. Dad's face flushed a deep crimson at the reminder. That was different. Garrett is my son, my firstborn. And there it is, I said softly, the words heavy with years of unspoken resentment. The real reason I was never given a chance. Not my ideas, not my education, not my work ethic, just my gender. The painful truth silenced the room again. Even Garrett had the grace, for once, to look uncomfortable. This conversation is over. Dad finally declared, his voice strained. Everyone out. I need to call my attorneys. He stormed from the dining room, the sound of his study doors slamming, echoing like a gunshot through the house moments later. Mom rose unsteadily to her feet. I should go check on him, she murmured, though she paused beside my chair, her gaze fixed on me. Are you really worth $200 million? I nodded. And all those times you couldn't come home for Christmas because you said you couldn't afford the plane ticket. I was running a company, Mom, I said, the truth catching in my throat. And I needed you all to keep underestimating me. She touched my shoulder briefly, an unreadable, complex expression on her face, then followed after Dad. As the dining room emptied, I remained seated, looking at the abandoned Thanksgiving feast around me. The once golden turkey had grown cold, the candles burned low, the elaborate centerpiece now just a grim tableau. The family I had once desperately yearned to impress had scattered in shock, anger, and utter disarray. It should have felt like victory. Instead, a hollow ache spread through my chest. I realized that while I had finally earned their attention, I was further than ever from truly earning their understanding. I retreated to the sanctuary of my childhood bedroom as the house below descended into utter chaos. Through the floor, I could hear Dad's furious shouting on the phone, presumably to his lawyers, while Mom's placating, whisker-tinged tones rose and fell in a futile counterpoint. Occasionally, Garrett's angry voice would join the cacophony, followed by Megan's dramatic, tearful wailing. My old room, untouched for a decade, remained frozen in time. It was a museum to the person I had been. The twin bed with its navy blue comforter, the worn desk where I'd spent countless hours coding and dreaming. The bookshelves were still lined with computer science textbooks and the few fantasy novels I'd allowed myself as rare indulgences. Dusty debate trophies and academic medals still adorned the shelves, poignant testaments to achievements that had never, ever impressed the one person whose approval I had sought most desperately. I ran my fingers along the spines of my old journals, pulling one out at random. Inside were detailed business plans, algorithm sketches, and notes for the very cloud integration platform that had eventually become Everest's flagship product. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. Everything I had built had begun right here, in this room, where I had felt most invisible. A sharp, insistent knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Garrett, his tie loosened, face flushed with either anger or alcohol, perhaps a potent cocktail of both. We need to talk, he slurred, pushing past me into the room without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door, leaning against it, arms crossed. About what, Garrett? How I ruined your Thanksgiving? Or how you plan to inherit a company you helped run into the ground? You think you're so clever, he hissed, pacing the small space like a caged, furious animal. Little Morgan with her computers and her secret identity. Did you enjoy lying to our faces all these years? About as much as you enjoyed taking credit for my ideas, I replied evenly, my voice ablaze. Remember when I suggested Adam's software should move to cloud-based solutions 6 years ago, during Christmas dinner? Dad dismissed it as trendy tech jargon. But somehow, 3 months later, You presented the exact same concept as your own strategic vision. Garrett stopped pacing, his expression darkening, a muscle twitching in his jaw. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who put in the time at the company while you ran off to California to prove some point. You put in time? Yes. But what did you actually contribute? Garrett, besides lavish expenses on the company credit card for client dinners at strip clubs and a corner office you used primarily for naps between hangovers. His face contorted with pure fury. You don't know what you're talking about. I brought in the Westfield account. Westfield came to Adams Software, I informed him, my voice chillingly calm, because I personally reached out to their CTO, as Emmy Stone, and recommended your services as part of my long-term acquisition strategy. And I know exactly what I'm talking about, because I've been auditing the company remotely for the past year, as part of my due diligence, including the financial records you thought were only accessible on the local server. The color visibly drained from his face. What are you saying? I know about the $300,000 you embezzled through fake vendor accounts, Garrett. I know about the phantom consulting fees that went directly to your personal offshore account. I know everything. He took a threatening step toward me. You can't prove any of that. I have transaction records, account numbers, and IP logs showing the falsified entries came from your office computer on days when only you were present in the building. I held his gaze steadily. I'm not planning to pursue criminal charges, Garrett. That would hurt the company during the transition. But don't test me. You, he whispered, hands clenching into fists at his sides. You would destroy your own brother. I would hold accountable a thief who happens to be related to me. I corrected him, my voice low and firm. There's a difference. We stood in tense silence until he finally turned away. This isn't over, he warned, yanking open the door. Actually, it is, I said to his retreating back. You just don't realize it yet. I had barely closed the door when another knock came. This time, it was Megan. Her makeup was freshly touched up, despite the faint tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. So, you were like a secret millionaire, she said without preamble, sashaying into my room and immediately flopping onto my bed. That's actually kind of badass. I couldn't help but laugh at her rapid pivot. Is that what you were going with 5 minutes ago? You were crying about losing your heiress status. She shrugged, examining her freshly painted manicure. I'm adaptable. It's essential for influencer longevity. She looked up with a sudden, calculating glint in her eyes. Just think of the content we could create together. My sister, the tech mogul. My followers would eat that up. Is that why you're here, Megan? To propose a business collaboration. More like a mutual arrangement, she said, smoothing her dress. You need a media presence for your company that humanizes you. And I need an authentic connection to actual business success instead of just looking pretty with products. The nakedly transactional nature of her proposal was so typically Megan that, I have to admit, I almost admired it. And what about actually working for the company? Learning the business? Contributing something beyond your Instagram aesthetic? She wrinkled her nose, truly repulsed. God, no. Coding is boring, and business meetings make me want to die. But I could be like the brand ambassador, the face of the company for the lifestyle market, the face of an enterprise software integration platform for the lifestyle market. I repeated slowly, letting the absurdity hang in the air. Do you hear yourself? Megan stood, straightening her shoulders with newfound dignity. Fine. Mock me, like everyone else in this family. But my social media skills are actually valuable in today's market, whether you respect them or not. I built my own brand from nothing, just like you did. The parallel had never, ever occurred to me before, and I found myself momentarily speechless. There was a strange kind of truth to it, though our methods and values diverged dramatically. I'll think about it, I said finally, but not tonight. She nodded, apparently satisfied with even this small concession. Just so you know, I've already posted about a major family business shakeup, without specifics. My engagement is through the roof. After she left, I sat at my old desk, powering up my laptop to check on the final details for tomorrow's announcement. A gentle knock interrupted me again. Come in, I called, expecting perhaps Maria with tea or one of the household staff. Instead, Mom entered. She looked surprisingly sober, given the amount of wine she'd consumed at dinner. She'd changed from her dinner dress into a soft cashmere sweater and slacks, her armor as a Boston society wife temporarily set aside. "Your father has locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch and the company bylaws," she said, settling into the window seat, the very spot where she used to sit and read me stories as a child. "Is convinced there must be some loophole to stop this sale." "There isn't," I said simply, calmly. "His lawyers already confirmed it." She nodded, looking around the room thoughtfully. "You know, I kept everything exactly as you left it. I always thought you'd come back, once you got this rebellion out of your system." "It was never a rebellion, Mom," I corrected gently. "It was a career, a life. $200 million, she mused, shaking her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips. "My little girl built a company worth $200 million, in secret, while we all thought you were struggling." I turned to face her fully. "You could have asked, Mom. Any of you could have shown genuine interest in what I was doing. But none of you ever really wanted to know." Tears welled in her eyes. "I knew, Morgan. Not the details, not the scale of your success. But I knew you were special. I saw it when you were little. The way your mind worked differently, how you understood things the rest of us couldn't grasp." She wiped at her cheeks, a raw vulnerability in her gaze. I didn't know how to help you. In a family like ours, with a man like your father. You could have stood up for me," I said, the old, sharp hurt rising unexpectedly in my throat. "All those times he dismissed me, humiliated me. You just sat there." "I was wrong," she admitted quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "I told myself I was keeping the peace, being a supportive wife. But I failed as a mother when you needed an advocate." The simple, raw acknowledgement pierced something long frozen inside me. I had come prepared for anger, for accusations, even for legal threats. I had not prepared for genuine remorse. "What happens now?" Mom asked, after a long, heavy silence. "Tomorrow morning, the acquisition becomes public. Adams Software will become a subsidiary of Everest Holdings. The company name will remain, for now, but operations will be completely restructured." I hesitated, then added, "Dad and Garrett will be offered advisory positions, with no actual authority, if they want them, mostly for appearances during the transition. And you? Will you move back to Boston?" I shook my head. "I'll remain in San Francisco. We'll install a new management team, hey?" She nodded, seeming to finally understand all I was not saying, that I had outgrown this house, this toxic family dynamic, this version of myself. "Your father may never forgive you for this," she warned softly. "I know," I acknowledged. "But this isn't about forgiveness, Mom. It's about finally being seen." I worked tirelessly until dawn, preparing for the morning's inevitable confrontation, ignoring the rapid-fire text from Isabella asking for updates. As the first pale, gray light of morning filtered through my curtains, I changed into one of my sharp Armani suits, styled my hair into a sleek chignon, and applied the subtle makeup that Emmy Stone was known for in her rare public appearances. This morning would bring either a new beginning for the Addams family, or its final, irrevocable fracturing. Either way, I was ready. The kitchen was eerily quiet when I came down at 7 a.m. Maria silently handed me a cup of coffee, her wise eyes communicating a complex mixture of concern and profound respect. The formal dining room had been meticulously cleared of last night's Thanksgiving disaster. No evidence remained of the family explosion, save for the lingering, palpable tension in the air. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my executive team, practically buzzing for updates on the acquisition announcement scheduled for 9 a.m. A text from Isabella flashed. "Did you drop the bomb? Are they still breathing?" I had just finished responding when Dad appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. He looked older, so much older than he had yesterday. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his normally perfect posture slightly stooped. He clearly hadn't slept a wink. "My study." Now, his tone left no room for discussion. I followed him down the hallway to the room that had always been the literal center of Adam's family power. The wood-paneled walls were covered with framed accolades, business journal covers featuring Dad, industry awards, photos with politicians and celebrities. Conspicuously, almost insultingly, absent was any recognition of my achievements, though my MIT graduation photo sat on a side table, half hidden behind more prominent family pictures. Dad took his seat behind the massive desk, a position he had used to intimidate business rivals for decades. I, however, chose not to sit in the visitor's chair as expected. Instead, I perched casually on the edge of the desk itself, a subtle, yet powerful, repositioning of our power dynamic that did not go unnoticed. My attorneys confirm what you said last night, he began without preamble, his voice flat. The sale is legally binding. The board vote was unanimous. Of course it was, I replied, my voice steady. Adam's software has been losing market share for 3 years. Your technology is outdated. Your management structure is bloated, and your development pipeline is empty. The board recognized a good offer when they saw it. $50 million, he said, shaking his head, a ghost of his former pride. The company was valued at $70 million just 2 years ago. The company was overvalued 2 years ago, I corrected, firmly, and I offered more than any other potential buyer would have. Most would have stripped the assets and dissolved the Adams name entirely. He looked up sharply, a flicker of genuine concern in his eyes. And is that your plan? To erase your own family legacy? No, I said, meeting his gaze directly. Despite everything, I respect what grandfather built and what you expanded. The Adams name stays, though the company structure will change significantly. For the very first time, a flicker of uncertainty, of genuine curiosity, crossed his features. What, exactly, are your plans? I had waited 10 years for him to ask my opinion on business matters. The profound irony was not lost on me. Adam's software will become the enterprise division of Everest Holdings, I explained, focusing on updating your legacy products and integrating them with our cloud platforms. We will retain approximately 60% of the current staff, with significant changes to upper management. And me, he asked, the question clearly costing him. You will be offered a position as chairman emeritus. No operational authority, but you will maintain an office and can advise on client relationships during the transition. His jaw tightened. A figurehead role. A respected advisory position. I counted, my voice calm, with full benefits and a generous compensation package. He stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the immaculately maintained garden. For a long, strained moment, he said nothing, his back to me, as he stared out at the property that generations of Adam's success had built. How did you do it? He finally asked, his voice barely a whisper, quieter now, devoid of its usual bluster. Build something that valuable when you had nothing. No connections, no startup capital. I had my education, I reminded him, the one thing he couldn't take from me, and I had tremendous motivation to prove you wrong. He turned back to face me, his gaze softer, more reflective. I expected you to fail. I know everyone does. You know. Fail. I mean, 90% of startups never make it past the first 3 years. I thought. He hesitated, visibly struggling with the words. I thought I was protecting you from inevitable disappointment by ensuring I never got the chance to try. I raised an eyebrow, a sardonic twist to my lips. That's not protection, Dad. That's control. He flinched slightly at the accusation. Perhaps. I built this company from what my father started. Expanded it 10 times over. I thought I knew best. But you didn't, I said simply, unequivocally. You were wrong about me. Wrong about the direction of the industry. And wrong about Garrett being the natural successor. At the mention of my brother, Dad's expression darkened once more, a flash of defensive anger. Garrett may have his flaws, but he has been loyal to this company. Garrett has been embezzling from the company for at least 3 years, I informed him bluntly. I have all the documentation. That's part of why I moved now, before he could do more damage. Dad sank back into his chair, a defeated slump. The shock of this new revelation was clearly too much to process while standing. That cannot be true. $300,000 siphoned through fake vendor accounts. The evidence is irrefutable. Why would he need to steal? He makes a generous salary. Has a trust fund. Gambling debts, I said. Sports betting, mostly, from what I can tell. Dad buried his face in his hands, briefly, before looking back up, suddenly appearing every one of his 68 years. So, both my son and my company were failing, and I was too blind to see either. The naked vulnerability in his admission caught me completely off guard. I had expected more anger, more accusations, definitely not this broken, raw acceptance. Not blind, I said, softening my tone slightly, just looking in the wrong direction. A long, profound silence stretched between us, filled with decades of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. When he finally spoke again, his voice had changed completely, the arrogance replaced with something approaching genuine curiosity. How did you do it? He asked. Really? No connections, no investors who knew the Adams name. How did you build something so successful? I considered deflecting, maintaining my hardened shell, but there was something in his question that seemed truly sincere, for the first time in our entire relationship. I started small, I explained. Freelance development work to build capital. Then I created a proprietary integration platform that solved a problem every enterprise company faces, connecting legacy systems with modern cloud architecture. It was actually based on the proposal you dismissed when I was 22. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, the one with the middleware solution. I nodded, surprised he remembered even that much. Yes, I refined it, made it more adaptable, used it to attract our first major clients. I reinvested every single profit. I lived in a studio apartment eating ramen for 3 years to keep overhead low. I built a team of brilliant people who believed in the vision, without the Adams name to open doors. Because of that, in some ways, I corrected. Being underestimated is a powerful position, if you know how to use it. No one saw me coming. He almost smiled at that. Clearly not. Another silence fell, but it was different now. Less hostile, more thoughtful. I check my watch. The press release goes out in 45 minutes. We should discuss next steps. What about Garrett and Megan? He asked. Garrett will be offered a choice. Resign quietly with a reasonable severance, or face potential legal consequences for the embezzlement. Megan, I paused, considering Megan actually made a compelling case last night for serving as a brand ambassador. Her social media skills are legitimately valuable in the right context. Dad looked genuinely surprised. You'd keep them involved. After everything. This was never about destroying the family, Dad. It was about claiming my place in it, on my own terms. He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the papers on his desk, then rising again to meet mine with unexpected, quiet directness. You outmaneuvered me completely, he said, and I was startled. I detected a note of something almost like pride in his voice. Your grandfather would have been impressed. Coming from him, it was as close to approval as I had ever received. I felt a complicated emotion rising in my chest. Not quite vindication, not quite forgiveness, but something profound, hovering in the space between. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, I stood in the newly renovated headquarters of Adams Everest Technologies. The former Adams software building had been completely transformed, buzzing with open workspaces, state-of-the-art technology, and a truly collaborative environment that respected the company's history while boldly embracing its future. My role as CEO of Everest Holdings meant splitting my time between San Francisco and Boston, overseeing the complex integration of the two companies and the exciting evolution of our expanded product line. The transition hadn't been easy, not by a long shot, but it had been far more successful than even my most optimistic projections had anticipated. Dad, surprisingly, had embraced his chairman emeritus role with unexpected grace. Once the initial shock and anger had finally subsided, he found genuine satisfaction in mentoring younger team members and maintaining relationships with long-standing clients. We'd established a weekly meeting, where he could offer insights on company history and industry relationships, and I found myself, to my own surprise, actually looking forward to these sessions. For the first time, we were building a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than on old expectations and bitter disappointments. Garrett's situation had been, as expected, more complicated. After facing the irrefutable evidence of his embezzlement, he had initially threatened legal action against both me and the company. But cooler heads, eventually, prevailed when he realized his options were severely limited. He accepted a conditional offer, repayment of the stolen funds, resignation from his executive position, and enrollment in an MBA program if he wanted any future role in the business. To my astonishment, he chose education over exile and was now halfway through his first semester, occasionally calling me with what seemed like genuinely thoughtful questions about business strategy. Megan had truly flourished in her new role as brand ambassador for our consumer products division, a small but rapidly growing part of the business that perfectly leveraged her social media expertise. Her followers had been utterly captivated by the dramatic family business saga, which she carefully presented as a story of female empowerment and family reconciliation, rather than the far more complex reality. Her Tech Eras rebrand had, in fact, opened doors to younger markets we had previously struggled to reach. But Mom, perhaps, had changed the most. She started volunteering with women's education initiatives and even joined the board of a tech incubator for female founders. "I want to help other girls like you," she told me, her eyes earnest, "so their mothers don't make the same mistakes I did." As I walked through the office, employees nodded respectfully or offered warm smiles in greeting. I was no longer Emmy Stone, the mysterious, reclusive founder. Nor was I Morgan Adams, the forgotten middle child. I was simply Morgan, the CEO, who had modernized a failing family business and created vibrant new opportunities for everyone involved. My assistant interrupted my thoughts. "Your father is waiting in the conference room with the quarterly reports," she informed me, "and your mother called to confirm dinner tonight with the potential investors." I thanked her and headed toward the meeting, pausing briefly by the newly installed company timeline in the main lobby. It powerfully displayed the evolution of Adams software, from my grandfather's humble garage startup to our current iteration as Adams Everest Technologies. My photo now hung proudly alongside those of my grandfather and father. 3 generations of leadership, with my own achievements listed with the same prominence, the same respect, as theirs. Thanksgiving was approaching again, and this year would be entirely, gloriously different. We'd planned a smaller, more intimate family dinner, stripped of the performative traditions that had dominated our previous gatherings. No formal gratitude ritual, no business posturing, just a family still learning how to truly see and hear each other, perhaps for the very first time. The journey from rejection to leadership had been longer, more arduous, and definitely more painful than I could have ever imagined when I left Boston 10 years ago. The challenges of merging family and business continued daily, demanding patience and a perspective I was still very much developing. There were still moments when the raw weight of past hurts threatened to overwhelm the incredible progress we had made, when old patterns of communication subtly re-emerged in tense meetings or even during family dinners. The hardest part, I realized, hadn't been the acquisition itself, but the ongoing, painstaking work of building relationships that could withstand both our shared, tumultuous history and our current, evolving professional roles. Dad still occasionally slipped into his old, authoritarian approach before catching himself, a brief shadow of his former self. And I sometimes found myself unnecessarily defensive, bracing for a dismissal that no longer came. Yet, slowly, deliberately, conversation by honest conversation, the Adams family was forging a new dynamic. Mom had hosted a dinner last month where, for the first time in my entire memory, everyone spoke equally. Everyone listened. And miraculously, no one stormed out in anger. Small victories, yes, but profoundly meaningful ones. Perhaps the most profound moment had come unexpectedly, late one night at the office, when Dad and I were reviewing the first quarter results after the merger. The numbers had exceeded all projections, client retention at 98%, new contracts increasing revenue by 32%. You know, he had said quietly, staring at the spreadsheet, his voice laced with a surprising sincerity. You have already accomplished more than I did in my first decade running this company. That simple, understated acknowledgement. It healed something deep inside me that I hadn't even realized was still broken. Not because I needed his professional validation anymore, but because it represented the human recognition I had sought all along. The experience had taught me that success itself isn't enough to heal family wounds. The satisfaction of proving myself had been incredibly sweet, yes, but ultimately hollow until it led to genuine connection. I had needed to learn that there's a crucial difference between winning and resolving, between being right and being truly whole. For anyone watching this who recognizes the painful, often unspoken, dynamics of family business, for anyone who has ever felt invisible or profoundly undervalued by those who should see you most clearly, I truly hope my story offers both inspiration and a gentle, but firm, caution. Building your own success is incredibly powerful, yes, but healing deep family wounds, that requires so much more than just professional achievement. It demands honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to offer second chances, even when they feel utterly undeserved. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced similar challenges in your own family or business? How did you navigate that incredibly complex intersection of personal relationships and professional ambition? Share your story in the comments below. I truly want to know. And if this journey resonated with you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for witnessing my journey from rejection to reconciliation. And remember, the true measure of success isn't just what you build alone, but what you ultimately manage to create together.